Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Bleckman. Phil, how's it going, man?
It's good, man. Which one of us is not on Magic Online?
Me. I don't really mess with Magic Online. Hold on, my dogs are going nuts.
We love dogs at the start of the show. So there's
Relax, dogs.
There's two different metas in the Eternal Durdle meta. There's the one with and without Zach.
Yes. The Zach meta and the not Zach meta, right?
You know, we just gotta upload more. We gotta upload more Zach to the Eternal Durdles meta.
Yeah. But yeah. So I guess the point I wanted to make this week was how. So I'm 100% for WotC taking action and banning some cards. Let's just start.
We're going right into the bad stuff.
Let's just start with, I am not saying that. I don't want anybody to misconstrue my point here. I think Rug Delver is a gigantic problem and it needs to be addressed.
Blue-Red Delver.
Sorry, Blue-Red Delver. Blue-Red Delver is a huge problem and that needs to be addressed. Now, I think that what we're seeing as far as numbers for Blue-Red Delver, being like 27, 28% of the meta online, I think that's 100% legit. I think that's what you're going to run into online every time. Like you're going to, 1 out of every 4 matches, if not more, is going to be you playing Blue-Red Delver, playing against Blue-Red Delver. That said, I think I had a really good conversation. My friend Dustin came down this weekend and we were talking about, there's a contingent of our friend group that beyond reason thinks that that there should be, in sort of the same spirit as there is a pre-modern format, that there should be a pre-War of the Spark format, which I 100% think is just, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not building decks for that. I just absolutely don't have the time, and I don't want to hear anyone's argument for like why that's a good idea. I just refuse to live like 4 years in the past. I think that's crazy as far as Magic design is concerned. I like the idea of like old dead formats that are kind of locked. That's cool to me. But this whole like old dead formats that are locked but are ostensibly formats that exist right now, no, thank you. To that end, when we were talking about it, I was saying to him, we went to Phil. You went to maybe you didn't. I can't even remember anymore. Did you go to the SCG event at Valley Forge that was in like January? You did. Yeah, I did see you. Okay.
Yeah, I played a lot of Entreat the Angels at that event.
That's right. So at that event, I played 6 rounds. I didn't play Blue-Red Delver 1 time. I was on Death Shadow. I did fairly well. I lost my first round and then won every round after that until my friends were like, let's go. And I was like, let's be honest, I'm not gonna take this thing down. So let's just go. But
I played against Days Wasteland at that event. I think I guaranteed I definitely played against it 3 times because I remember I went 1-1 against Blue-Red Delver. I specifically played against Blue-Red Delver twice. And then I played against a Death Shadow player, a Bug Death Shadow player, which is effectively Delver Days Wasteland. So yeah, I played against that shell 3 times that I remember in that event. So yeah, about roughly what you would expect as running average for running against that shell.
And for what it's worth, I played Death Shadow, which is Days Wasteland as well.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say this: I think that in IRL, like in real life, that personally speaking, I think that Blue-Red Delver is boring. It's a deck that I could almost always field, and I almost never did because I was like, meh, this is not as fun to me as another deck I could be playing, and I have a finite amount of time to hang out with friends, to play it at the LGS, to go to this event, whatever. I don't want to be the guy who's playing, the stock list of the best deck. It's boring to me. Now, I'm not a professional Magic player. I don't try and like qualify for Pro Tours. I'm there mostly to have a good time. And at the end of the day, I've maybe put together $1,000 in prize stuff in larger events over the last 20 plus years of playing Magic, right? I had 25 plus years, let's say, of playing Magic. So I'm not the type of person that's going to just choose like the best deck every time. I think that's, like I said, I think that's boring. That's not how I want to spend my time. Now, if I'm playing a deck that is my pet deck, like Rug Delver was back in the day, that got tools like Renin 6 and stuff like that, and it happens to be the best deck, I'm not going to not play it, you know. But I'm not going to switch to a deck that I think is better in a meta just because it's winning more often. And I think that is the opposite feeling that you get when you're playing on Magic Online, which I have a Magic Online account. I just never, like, my computer's too old to reliably run MTGO, so I don't. That said, I think that when you're playing on Magic Online, there's no expectation of personality to carry you forward in the day. You know, like if I'm playing a 12-round event or whatever, you know, however many round, 10-round event on Magic Online, no one's sitting across from me in a substantial way where, like, I'm having a conversation with them, I'm playing the game, and my personality is coming through. So I don't feel like I have to, you know, make a deck choice based on, like, hey, like, this is who I am as a person. I'm just like, I'm here to grind. That's what Magic Online is to me. It's zero personality, all competition. And in scenarios like that, yes, I think that Blue Red Delver is certainly at least 25 or more % of the meta, specifically because people don't care about what other people think of them. They're gonna play their deck. And that's not saying, like, because you're playing Blue Red Delver, you're a bad person. Just like none of your personality has a chance to come through, and you're not playing cards that are, like, signature to you because of that.
Yeah,
if that makes any sense. So I think that in real life, Blue Red Delver is maybe slightly less of a problem, though. Again, like I said, I think that we need to get rid of Expressive Iteration at the very least, and if not as well, Murktide Regent. But I think that it's a bit sensationalized to say that, like, you know, every fourth person in a like IRL event, especially at your LGS, you know, is playing Blue Red Delver, unless, like, you just happen to be in that meta.
Yeah, I don't disagree that going after the top deck is obviously the way to solve a format where there's, like, it's very obvious that Blue Red is the dominant deck by a pretty substantial margin. Like, I don't think there's any discussion about, like, it not being the case that that's true. I don't know if, like, trying to figure out if it's, you know, Murktide needs to go and then it's just replaced with the next best threat, or if it's Expressive that needs to go, and then, you know, whatever the next best card advantage spell goes right back in, and then we don't actually see the needle move all that much. Like, granted, Expressive Iteration is considerably better than Predict, but the fact that, like, the Blue Red, like, the deck that's gone a little bit bigger, that's already playing 2 Predicts and 6 total of that effect between 4 Expressive and 2 Predict, that there's already the presentation that Predict could just take that slot with DRC in the deck.
Yeah.
And then it, like, how much of the percentage goes down when they do still have a card advantage engine in their deck between being able to control the top of their library with cantrips, DRC, they have the Mystic Sanctuary still in the deck, all of these tools. So it's possible that Expressive Iteration would be enough. Same thing with Murktide. I think with Murktide, like, you do have other options. Like, there is a Ledger Shredder that's right there. Obviously, it's nowhere near as good, but you also do still have, like, the access to go into the third color. I mean, the deck was playing Uro for a while. They just went up to 19 lands, played Uro. Like, that was a deck for a while, and it did well, and it beat up on other Delver decks, and all that nonsense, gave them just as much grinding power. And, you know, we could see a return to that, but then it's possible that would be enough, because then they open themselves up to Wasteland. But then there's, you know, counterplay to that, because Wasteland has never really been an effective strategy at dealing with Blue Red because they're so efficient now. That all of that is to say that I don't know if just going after the bans that people, at least from what I've heard, the bans that people want most would actually solve the problem that we want solved, as much as looking towards something that would be a bit more substantial. Like, if there are untouchables in the format, and we want to talk about what needs to go, and then you have friends talking about, like, how great would it be to have a pre-War of the Spark legacy. I think that a discussion that doesn't happen, that we should at least entertain. Like, the chances of something like this happening are so minimal to the point of, like, it being 0%. But I think having a broader discussion about what are the cards that make the format actually not good.
Yeah.
But you know, I get that that's subjective, but like, you know, I think of cards like when it comes to like the War of the Spark cards, like all those planeswalkers that are just a prison lock pieces that make games way less interesting than they otherwise would be because they're so powerful. Same thing with Expressive and Murktide and all these other cards. I think it would be more interesting to delve into of banning a large swath of cards. Like let's get 10 cards on the block, get rid of all of them, and then see what Legacy looks like, and then unban from there based on what things look like it shook out more aggressively than we thought would happen. Because I think like we've done the experiment of just ban whatever the best cards we think in Delver are that aren't the shell, and that's literally been the case for a decade. Like we've been doing
that's the same thing with Mishra's Workshop decks in Vintage. Yeah. They're just like, well, we'll ban this artifact. It's like, yeah, it's basically a 55 card deck with like all one-ofs that are extremely powerful.
Yeah,
right.
If exactly, it's a similar argument. If Mishra's Workshop is untouchable, if it's like it will never be restricted in Vintage, okay, then the inevitability, because they're never going to print something that's more powerful than Mishra's Workshop at what it does, then the deck is just going to be for Mishra's Workshop, and then the rest of the deck is singletons at a certain point, right? Like that is an inevitability. So it's obviously to a lesser degree, but in a similar vein with Blue-Red Delver, they're just always going to adopt the best tools. Like the shell is the most efficient shell that can absorb all of the best tools. So the best tools will always be in that deck, regardless of what the format looks like. Whatever the best tools in that format are, they will be in the Delver deck. So trying to go after those tools that aren't the shell over and over and over again, we're just going to continue to run into the same problem over and over and over again. And then our podcast is just going to have the same content over and over and over again. And I think that like, if we actually step back and we're like, okay, what are the decks? Like, what are the cards that are oppressive for archetypes, right? Like, if you want to play, like, you can't really play other versions of Delver without significantly hindering yourself, because Blue-Red just has all of the most optimized tools. Same thing with a bunch of other archetypes, though, too. Like, if you want to play control, if you're not playing Teferi and Narset, you're kind of just handicapping yourself. If you want to play a fatty strategy, if you're not playing Grizzlebrand, you're just handicapping yourself. Like, I think if we removed some of the tools that are just so far and away better than all of the alternatives, that would make for a more diverse and interesting format that wouldn't feel as stale, even though the best deck being Delver is, a quote unquote fair interactive strategy. And I think that like a fair interactive strategy we should be promoting like interaction between deck. Like the worst thing that would happen is if Oops All Spells was the best deck in the format and it wasn't close. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think it's like you were saying about the content thing. Like I shy away from having this like what should be banned conversation constantly, because like I just feel like that's so much of what of what the internet is for legacy content, and I hate to contribute to that, because it's like either they will or they won't. Like we can have this conversation for a decade out, and it's going to be like they took 10 times out of the let's say 10 years worth of content, so 500-ish episodes of content. 10 times during that we're like, well, they finally did it, guys. So like you don't get a positive interaction with that sort of thing very often. It's like there's you just want to make sure that you're not constantly harping on like, oh, I gotta make bans, it's so important, but at the same time, like we do need to be out there being like calling for this stuff occasionally. So
well, I think that like that's part of why the whole idea that we have to be really tentative with bans. You know what it reminds me of, just because it's been in the news a lot recently, is anytime I'm having a ban list discussion with somebody, it feels like anytime I'm ever talking about the Supreme Court with anybody, where it's like every single time a new judge is getting added to the Supreme Court, or if a judge is stepping down or something, it's like this cataclysmic event for American society. Yeah. Right, like it is the determination of the future of everything, and it all rests on this one person that is a part of a cabal of 9 individuals. Right, like it's just like this insanely important thing that feels arbitrary. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, like if we wanted to try something, rather than just be like, these cards need to go, oh, wait a minute, we just fall into the same trap that we've fallen in. Who could have foreseen this happening? I think that like there are other approaches to be taken. Like if we don't go after specific cards, and we're tired of going after and falling into the same pitfall, then I think going about how we ban cards should be something that we consider changing. So, for example, rather than just being like Murktide needs to go, Expressive needs to go, whatever other cards that you don't like needs to go, you know, like I was an advocate for Days going, still am, but like these things aren't going to happen. These cards aren't as objectively broken as like previous things that they banned, and they have all the data that they would need now to make any of those calls. Anyway,
Yeah.
I think that a different strategy about banning would be interesting. So instead of saying we haven't seen the numbers, we're not going to ban this, everybody's upset, people aren't interested in playing, the format feels stale, whatever, we go, okay, until October 31st, 2022, these cards are banned. This list is revoked as of the 31st. So your cards are guaranteed to be unbanned by the 31st. But that and make clear that doesn't mean that these cards are then going to be banned after the fact. It is for us to get a subset of data without these cards in the format, what that looks like, and then what the how the community feels with those cards removed.
Yeah.
Is it positive? What are the ones where we go, we can't believe this card's not in the format, please add it back, right? Like whatever, like that would give more, particularly because Legacy is not a competitively supported format by WotC, right? Like a lot of it is community driven. All of the bannings that they've made have been pretty much just community outcry for the last decade. I think doing something where they can actually get data from what a format would look like and get community feedback on that theoretical format would be more healthy than being like, are we or are we not going to ban this thing? Please do this, WotC. And then WotC's like, okay, stop badgering us. We'll get rid of it.
Yeah.
And then everybody's
Stop
like, oh my
pizza.
God, why do I keep buying cards? And then you keep banning all the cards that I buy. And it's like, I think that there could be a more strategic approach to bannings without any of the stress of it being final, right?
Yeah.
Hey guys, these cards are banned for 6 months. Your format is eternal. They will come off the ban list guaranteed on this date. And then we will use the data gathered in those 6 months to determine whether or not cards will be added back to the ban list or remain in the format based on community feedback and supported data that we have gathered. Like, I think that would, like, at the very least, you just give a brief reprieve so people who want to try the format out again that felt it was stale, they can hop back in and get a taste of it, and then also give feedback. And it's like, yeah, it turns out nobody misses Oko. Right.
Well, that's kind of the thing too, is so you know, to go on my rant about digital versus IRL, is that the formats get solved so fast, right? That's why I generally don't play Moto or Arena for that matter, because I was really into competitive Hearthstone for a while, and that's even more exacerbated because you've only got 30 card decks and it's 2 ofs, right? Where a new set comes out, everything is in chaos for about a week. Then the format gets immediately solved because like people have been, you know, figuring out these things, playing constantly. Just people are just bashing their heads into each other. So you find out the best deck relatively quickly. And then for the next 2 or 3 months, depending on how long it takes for them to put out a set, the format's solved and the game is very boring to play. It's actually why I stopped playing Hearthstone, because I got to a point where I was like, I mean, I hit Legend, and now it's just like, it's only fun for about a week, and I'm spending money on this thing, you know? Like, so I think that the playing online sort of exacerbates that issue of fun in the format and like what to ban and how quickly things get solved. And so I make that point to say this. I think that your idea is interesting because it does give you that reprieve and allows you to see a fresh format for at least, you know, a month or so. Where everyone's trying to figure out like, okay, well, if the format loses these 10 cards, like, what do we do? You know? And I think that would be a healthier way to approach the ban list, honestly.
It, at the very least, is a different way to approach the ban list, because the way that we do it now has not proven to be successful or effective.
No.
So I think that one thing that also is a nod to the fact that, like, with more powerful cards having come out in the last couple of years, and your point about the format being solved immediately, formats being solved, like, that's not really, that's less so on, I'll put less of that on WotC and more so on the fact that the game is so big and so popular that people can iterate games so fast that like, that's just a volume thing. Like, the game is popular.
Agreed.
That's it. So, like, that I'll put less on. However, I do think that doing something where we get rid of like the egregiously powerful cards that are just so objectively better than everything else for a bunch of different archetypes, then when you sit down and play, like, if I sit down and somebody shows me they're on Yori and D&T, they're on 80 cards and you pretty much can discern their entire 95, their 95, right? Whereas, like, if we got rid of Yorion, do any of, like, is there variety in decks? You know, like, one thing, when you sit across from Blue Red Delver, you're playing against the same 75. Like, maybe people are playing like a different number of matting.
There's literally a four card flex slot. That's
there's four card flex. Like, are you running 1 or 2 Pyroblasts? Are you running 2 or 3 or maddening hacks in your sideboard? Like, aside from like those like very subtle, like, who cares nuances, there isn't variety in the same way that, like, a long time ago when you have Grixis Delver and Rug Delver and straight blue-red with like Swift Spear and like all these different styles of archetypes. So I think that the reason that a bunch of the archetypes have sort of like fallen in upon themselves to just the most optimized versions, they're not necessarily the best versions of that deck in like a vacuum. They're the best versions of those decks because of the objectively too powerful cards that everybody wants gone. So if we got rid of a bunch of the cards that are just objectively too good from the last couple of years and see what kind of innovation happens within an archetype, I think would be really interesting. And I'm coming that from a place of, I'm somebody who has been playing Miracles for the last, third of my life. And I iterate on trying to figure out how to make Counterbalance work because that's the card that I enjoy playing with the most, that and Entreat the Angels and all that stuff. And there's a ton of, like, when you give yourself the restraint of, like, I dislike playing with Narset and Teferi. Because, like, I think they're like, every time either of them hits the table, the games are just objectively less fun. And so unless I'm going to a very large competitive event that I'm looking to spike, it's not really the experience that I'm looking to have as a good time, because, like, Teferi hits the table, neither of us do anything anymore, and it's like, okay, why did we even show up then?
You might as well just be playing a game with like blank cards and numbers.
But, like, my biases aside, like, the conversations that I have with people when we're trying to figure out what's the best version of Miracles, when we're trying to optimize without those walkers, like, the variety that you get in those different decks is really interesting. Some people are on Stoneforge Mystic. Some people are on Otherworldly Gaze. Some people are cutting red. Like, I was cutting red so I could play Unexpectedly Absent. Some people are moving over into, like, other splashes other than red, thinking that, like, oh, Pyroblast isn't actually helping solve all of the problems that we need, and it's taking up too much space. Like, the discussion on, like, just the variety within an archetype is so much wider, and the only difference is really we're removing the arbitrarily powerful things that are just so much more objectively better than everything else, because they're lock pieces and draw engines, and they do everything, and they're cheaper than Jace. And then so it's like, okay, there's literally no reason to not be playing these cards if you're looking to win, and that's true. But I think, like, the volume of things that I think are healthy for gameplay and for deck building and for community dialogue, I think that if we remove those toxic pieces, in my mind, which could be Murktide and Expressive and Yorion and the walkers from War of the Spark and all of the shit, and then we see what the format actually looks like, is it an invigorating experience to have that people actually want to engage in? And if so, then leave those cards out. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, even if they're not too good, like, even if they shouldn't be banned, like, if they turn people off to play the game, if every time somebody plays against an Expressive, they're like, all right, well, I'm fucking dead, then it doesn't, like, at that point, like, what's the point of having a community focused or a community driven format? Like,
well, that's the thing that I think is kind of wild, is that, like, I've been probably, seriously is a hard word to say about EDH, but I've been seriously playing EDH probably for like 4 or 5 years now, a little after we started the cast. And I think it's wild how much my opinion has changed about what makes up a good event for me. Like, when I go to a tournament, and this is when I'm playing, sealed or standard or it's not so much like to yuck someone else's yum and be like, oh man, like I hate like seeing control or whatever, but like knowing that I'm coming with a deck that I feel like to quote those terrible like we're fishing for information magic surveys that WotC does, where it's like I like a deck that I like to express my personality through deck building. But there is a bit of that in the game, and I think my experience with EDH has only exacerbated that in me and made it more of a thing. But to me, like what makes a good event is like I walk away going, man, I had a great time. I played some fun. I played some good rounds, and I don't feel like I played a deck that made me feel like I was oppressing people in a way that like made them feel like the game was not fun. And that's and I'm playing Rug Delver 9 times out of 10. So like think about what that even means,
I want to speak to that point. And I think a lot of the cards that people find really uninteresting, whether it be Murktide or Expressive, the War of the Spark cards, Grizzlebrand,
TNN,
Allosaur Shepherd, like any of these cards that have gotten like tagged as just being oppressive or uninteresting. I think the reason that they are like that, at least this is my point of view, is that they're so easy. They just do everything for you for free. Nothing, you don't have to, you make no concessions, you make no effort, you just get to have it all. You know what I mean? And I think that like, it's like, oh, like we did this battle, I got outplayed, but I drew Expressive Iteration, doesn't need any setup, just gives me 2 cards for 2 mana, like too easy. I drew Murktide Regent, just an 8/8 flyer that kills you in a turn, like didn't have to do anything, just played the game, and all of a sudden I have a rate that's like exceedingly too good. I put a Grizzlebrand into play, just draw my whole deck, like there was no contention here, it just lets me do it. Like I'm playing Reanimator, it could have been any fatty, but this one just lets me have it all. Allosaur Shepherd's in play. Nothing, you can't interact with me. Nothing's counterable. This isn't counterable. Nothing, you can't do anything. You can't do stuff. War of the Sparkwalkers, I get to draw cards. You can't play. Like, the thing is that the only thing that they ask of you for the most part is to have the mana. That's it. There's no deck building constraint around them at all, really. Like, I get you could argue Grizzlebrand's a whole archetype, like it's a thing. But like, I'm just saying that it asks, like these cards do it, like the cards do it for you. You don't play the cards play themselves. And I think that's how I felt.
I think that's how I felt when because like rarely do I have a visceral reaction to a card in a competitive format where I'm like, ew, I'd never play that. But that's how I felt with Leovold, actually. I was like, I would never, like, no, absolutely not with this card.
Yeah, I mean, it's like to a lesser degree, like Leovold puts a stage on the game where it's like it alone is a 3/3 and then puts conditions on the game. Like I agree, like Leovold isn't healthy, but at least it's something that's like easily interacted with.
Interact with it, yeah.
And like it doesn't it stops one axis, but like it's easily interacted with, and it's not until you point something at it that it replaces itself, right? It's just a 3/3 for 3 until you do something else. Now, granted, I've lost many a game to Leovold. I understand that it like puts a prison effect on the game, but like it's a 3-mana 3/3 in 3 colors, and it's similar to Spirit of the Labyrinth, even though it's asymmetrical. But like at the same time, I don't know. Like you point out Leovold, and I'm like, the difference between Leovold and Narset in terms of deck building consideration is like it just feels so much wider for Leovold. Like you can point removal spells at Leovold in reasonable fashion. Leovold doesn't replace itself immediately. Yeah. It's
well,
like,
and it's 3 colors, obviously. Like one color versus 3 colors. Obvious.
Like the fact that it's also like there's the difference between it being on a creature that doesn't end the game immediately, the same way that like Narset can. Yeah. Because it just is a dig through time on top of the fact that it's like if Leovold ETB'd and said dig through time also, like I think people would feel differently. But and I find that like the cards that I gravitate towards the least, that I like the least, are the ones where I feel like I'm not playing the game, the cards are. And that's kind of how like I assume that people must experience Omnath when like 4-mana Omnath and other formats. It's just like, oh, I just play lands, and then this card does all of the things for me for free.
Exactly.
I don't have to do anything other than do what the game tells me to do anyway, which is just play a land.
That's a reality we've been living in since 2013, I want to say, when like they stopped making like symmetrical effects for your permanents. So like Master of the Pearl Trident versus Lord of Atlantis is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Where like one you could play and it could make you lose the game, right? And another one is just like strictly better, like for the most part. Like you're just like, I'm playing this and I'm gonna win.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said about like, you know, they want like their designs, they want cards for the most part. I mean, it wasn't always the case a long time ago, but nowadays, like if a card tells you to do something, they want the card to also be able to fuel the thing that it can do in some way, to let you be able to do the thing and then not feel like you didn't actually get to play with the experience that you wanted to have. So like if a card says like sack a token, they'll usually give you a means to at least make a negligible token to be able to do the thing that the card says. Like, okay, cool. Like you want everybody to be able to play the cards and have the experience with the cards. But like to be able to do that without it being some immensely important resource. Like also you draw a card. Also you just get to have free mana. Also you just get to tutor your library or some shit.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, I think that like, I don't know. We've gone a little bit off the rails, but
yeah, we're well off the ranch at this point.
The takeaway from this episode is let's try to have a discussion of if there was a temporary 6-month ban list where you knew cards were guaranteed to come off the ban list at a set date. What are the cards that you would want to go up on the ban list to see what the format would be like without them? That can be like in any deck or like cards from any deck, but think beyond just like stuff that you don't like to play against. Like I don't like playing against DRC, but I don't necessarily think that it should be on the block immediately the same way that I would argue for stuff like Murktide or Expressive or the War of the Spark tragedy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like at the same time, if that's where, if most people are like, no, DRC actually creates a really negative experience and we think it's bad for the game, like, yeah, then we would be able to try it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that is a more interesting approach to how we should go about banning cards, other than public outcry for something that ultimately doesn't change the metagame at all in any meaningful way.
R.E. Ragavan.
I.e. Ragavan being like the most recent prime example of it was the best deck, they got rid of Ragavan and it did nothing except solve its bad matchups.
Changed nothing.
If anything, it just harmed D&T.
Yeah. Well, I think for the most part, I think that's all we kind of have to say about that. To quote Forrest Gump.
Yeah, I mean, this is also like we like didn't think through like every single card that we would think is like, oh, this is obviously negative for the format, so let's put it on. Let's like temporarily suspend it.
Yeah.
So like, you know, I mean, aside from the obvious cards, are there other things that are just like egregiously make the game worse for the most part that don't actually support any viable archetypes or interesting archetypes that are healthy for the game? And you know, should they go and like see what the format would look like without it? I think that would be interesting for a temporary period, and then see what people are clamoring for to have back. That's the thing that I think would be most interesting. It's like if Grizzlebrand went away, is it like everybody's like, wow, Reanimator is just fucking unplayable, like in its entirety. Like Archon is just not good enough to replace it. Like we need Grizzlebrand back if this is just going to be a functional. It's like, okay, cool. At least now we know, right?
Yeah.
It's like it seems like Archon is the immediate obvious replacement, but is it? We don't know because it's not. It's all in a Grizzlebrand world. You know what I mean? Like, I think it would be. I think that's where it would be interesting. Like, if Murktide and Expressive went, where would the Delver decks go? Would it be better for the format, or would they be like, wow, Delver really fell off the map? It's at like 4% now. It sucks shit. Like, maybe they should give him a card back. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot more meat to this bone. I would say.
We got a meaty episode in.
Yeah. To that end, I want to thank all of our Patreon supporters. Thank you for bearing with us for a couple of weeks while we took our summer break. We're back at it now. I think we should call this episode "Nuke the Format."
Duke Nukem the format.
Duke Nukem the format. Yeah, I think that's it for us this week. I don't even have any good events coming up or anything. You got anything coming up anytime soon?
Yeah, I'm gonna be playing in the Legacy Pit
Nice.
2 in October. And if anybody is thinking, what would the format look like if we banned X number of cards? You can, experiment and post some deck lists on MoxField.
Yes, that's correct. You can go to MoxField.com and check out the one of what I would consider to be the greatest Magic the Gathering websites as far as deck building is concerned. So you just go on there. You can build your deck. You can. It works on your PC. It works on your Mac. It works without like downloading an app or anything on your phone. It's honestly, it's the best way to build decks online. You should go to moxfield.com and check that out.
And although that is advertising copy, he's actually genuine. That is actually genuine. That it's like a legitimately good site for like tinkering with deck lists and cards that you're considering for deck lists. Like beyond the copy that we agreed to read for MoxField, like we actually do believe.
Yeah,
believe
and
it, even
you can go to the Eternal. We now have the Eternal Durdles MoxField account where you can go and check out all the decks we've got there. Comment on them. There's a whole social aspect to MoxField too that is pretty awesome, and I think they're going to be bringing more to that realm as well as time goes on. So,
and then
I don't know.
Of social,
check it out. I say.
Speaking of social outside of deck lists, you can also hop in our Discord if you want to chat with us specifically about this idea
Link
for
below.
A temporary ban list of getting rid of all the shit that we're tired of playing with and against.
Yep. All right. Well, I think that does it for us this week. Everybody have a good day, and Phil, I'll see you next week.
What'd it do?
Hey, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out this other video. You'll probably like it.